We are just missing Jace, who is walking in right now. If everyone wants to turn around and go right out there. Perfect timing. We're just getting started. Yeah, thank you everybody for coming out. I think at this point, I hope everybody kind of knows a little bit about this series and what it's about. But essentially, this is all about climate organizers in different places, different terrains, different issues, and kind of like things that really connect everybody. This panel specifically is about intersectionality in the climate space and why that matters. I think whoever was here last night heard Thomas come and say, like, this title of climate activist is not something that folks who are actually climate activists necessarily give themselves. Climate organizing is very much a necessity for survival in these places, and I think a lot of people, when they think about climate, think about it as like, oh, you know, just going green, whatever that looks like, but there's so many more things to that, and the reason that we have these six on this panel is because I think everybody that is on this panel and the work that they do, it's not necessarily just climate. In fact, none of it is just climate. These six individuals specifically, when we were, me and Carlos and Tomas, before every single project, we have like a phone call, a Zoom call with everybody, and trying to just get like an idea of like who they are, what is their story, how they want to be seen. And everybody on here, everybody in the project, when we started talking to them, it was like, okay, well, this is a lot more than just like cut and dry, like this is my issue. There was so many other things that were on top of that. And I'm gonna stop talking a little bit, but I did kind of want to just open the floor and just ask some of our guests here, what does intersectionality mean in your work, and what does intersectionality, just the word, mean to you? Kind of want to see if you would like to start, Jennifer, because I feel like you were the one person when we started talking. For yours specifically, I was just like, damn, there's a lot here. I don't know how to get started, so I'm gonna put you on the spot.
Hi everyone, my name is Jennifer Thompson. I was a part of the TOKALA shoot with Victor Allen. To me, when I hear the word intersectionality, I think of the space where a lot of things come together that might not necessarily always have things in common. And I know that's like very rough, very vague, but I think intersectionality just fits into so many different spaces in our lives. And so specifically, coming to this project and identifying now as a climate organizer / activist, I bring a intersectional viewpoint of food and agriculture to the climate. That's where my passion lies. That's what the project on Sappho is about. We started that project when we were in college. We were only 18 to 19 years old, and we were just interested in how a community was surviving, and how we can help them to continue to survive their food specifically. And as we continued to work, there were all these other things that came up around land sovereignty, the environmental crises that continues to impact our southern coast, as well as social things that weren't being accessed easily by the community. And so like intersectionality, once again to me, is this space where all of these things that might not have anything in common are able to come together and build an even stronger foundation towards the work that we're doing.
Yeah, I feel like, especially what's going on in the South with, we have the Stop Cop City, which is happening in just outside of Atlanta, and that is very much a land issue. But I think, when we brought this up, like there's very much, this is a police issue, and these two things are very connected. And I think, when I think in my head, like what connects like everybody, I really thought about you and Jace. Because Jace, the work that you do is very much obviously a land issue, and it's very much tied to policing, and it's very much tied to all of these things, but in a way different way. So I'm gonna put you on the spot now, and I just ask if you can introduce yourself. I know you just came in, and we haven't caught up at all, but if you can introduce yourself to everybody and just give a little light in terms of like what your work looks like and what intersectionality in your work looks like.
Hello everybody, my name is Jace Charger from Inglewood, South Dakota. Just pulled in here just this morning. And a lot of the work I do is community based, more on a grassroots level, working in the trenches with the people, by the people, directly with people, and directly effects. A lot of it is climate justice, a lot of it is interracial justice, and a lot of it is land justice. But we tie into our culture into that, like intersectionality of art, music, and our culture, and our land all ties in together on a daily basis. You know, when you come from a small town like I do, it is very hard to not have a daily culture. Not to have your daily culture affect your daily life, and also having infrastructure coming in a very tourist spot in South Dakota, and also having your land interrupted by industrialists in the name of progress, coming into breaching your lands, your ancestral lands, and being policed by that, by a racist state who does not acknowledge the indigenous people's claim to the land. We don't claim ownership, we claim to protect it. And just coming from this last year of, my experience of defending pipelines of the Dakota Access and the Keystone XL, just got a probation last year for that. And the day I was being prosecuted was the day so many Trumpsters stormed the Capitol, but I was being arrested in a small town for peacefully protesting and protecting the water and land, where there's so many police brutality going on in my community. But I think it goes to show how racial injustice and climate justice go hand in hand. But we try to use art, music, and our culture to combat that on a daily basis. To also express and teach the world about our culture and our heritage in a respectful way, because we do guard it as Indigenous people by being exploited, not only through social media, but through television, through movies, and this project really gave me the opportunity to break U.S. stereotypes and to stand in the same footsteps that many more of us are following here today. And that's just a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I kind of want to swing to this side. I think what you were kind of speaking on, Jace, there's definitely a through line with Danielle. I think with the whole idea with Danielle's shoot was just this idea of how the river that goes through Hoopa is so closely tied to everything else within the community, in terms of like the food, but then it also goes into the mental health and all of these things that are very much connected. And I think what everybody's kind of saying a little bit when they said that it's not about ownership of the land, it's really what I've learned a lot, or just was really reinforced through this project, is that like there's not a difference between the land and us. Like I think there's this idea that we've come to think through, like capitalism, where like we're able to pull resource, like this is like the land, but it's like no, this is very much connected. And I feel like Danielle, like what your story was very, very much about that. And I just want you to introduce yourself and give a little bit of light to that.
Hey y'all, we do Danielle Rey Frank. Hello everybody, my name is Danielle Frank. I come from the Hoopa villages of Met Dillon and San Ronaldo, located along the Trinity River in California, and the Yurok village of Huntananting, also known as Watek, located on the Klamath River in also Northern California. Intersectionality, to me, is something that just really speaks to the interconnectedness of all living things and within our communities and outside of our communities. I grew up on the Hoopa, can everybody hear me? Okay. I grew up on the Hoopa Indian Reservation. I was born there, and our population is about 2,000 to this day. It's very small, it's very rural, it's very, very beautiful, and it's very culture-based. Our community is built around the Trinity River. This is something that we believe that the river is our lifeline to the rest of the world, to the rest of the people, to everything that once was and everything that will be. There's a lot of stories in our community about, the river and just how everything connects to it. And so the interconnectedness, like I was saying, the interconnectedness within our community is just so, it's something that has been taught to me since the day I was born, I guess. It's not something that I have never not known. I grew up with my dad being an avid water protector, with his parents being part of the American Indian movement, with their ancestors being part of the people who got our tribes recognized as, federally recognized, making sure that we had rights. And so I just grew up knowing that what I did affected others, and what others did affected me, and what we did collectively affected everything else. And the way that we treated our lands, and the way that we treated our waters, is the way that they would in return treat us. And so when we're talking about this intersectionality and why it's so important to recognize how connected things are, it's because what we're doing right at this very moment affects everything within that circle of life that we've come to know. And that's not something that everybody thinks about. One thing that, when I go into more urban spaces and talk about water issues, I come from the Klamath and the Trinity Rivers, and so on the Klamath River, we have huge problems, but we also have huge successes. So we're currently completing the largest river restoration and dam removal project that's ever been done in the world. And that only became possible because we worked towards it in so many different ways, working with different communities, different groups, different people, and we were really able to reach out and work with people who were doing cultural fire, people who were working in state politics that came from our communities, people who were working nationally. And so I think one thing about intersectionality also is just recognizing that there's strengths in so many different places in this world that we can utilize to really make our goals and our dreams come true. And so that's kind of a little bit of what intersectionality is to me.
Thank you. I feel like everything you just said is very true to everybody here. And I did want to introduce Alessandra, who's sitting next to me. She is from where I'm from, Denver, Colorado. I think with Alessandra's story, and for me personally, like growing up in a city that is a little bit more metropolitan, I think a lot of times when you think of climate, when you think of spaces like where Jace is from or where Danielle's from, that is a little bit smaller, that's a little bit more like directly next to a river, next to these Black Hills, next to these spaces that you can see. But for me, when we started talking about Denver, and Tomas is from there as well, we're like, okay, well, what's the issue? And Tomas was like, well, I really want to talk about Suncor, which is a oil refinery, petroleum refinery just northeast of Denver. And kind of speaking to a little bit of earlier in terms of like people not really thinking about climate justice, it's just kind of a means for survival. And when he told me about that, like the effects that it has on people, like with this radiation that is there and just what it's doing to the air, which is in a Black and brown community that I also grew up in. He was telling me about it and I was like, word, like I didn't know any of that, like I just was there existing. And I think so much of this climate work the climate issue is very disproportionately put on our communities because it's not something that we think about, it's just something we have to deal with. And I think for those and everybody that's on this panel who is able to pinpoint that and fight against that and make sure that that's something different, I find that to be very powerful and very important, like this journey as to like why they're doing what they're doing. So I'm gonna let you introduce yourself and give a little bit of like what it is that you're doing, how you got into this space, and why you're in this space.
Hi everyone, my name is Alessandra Chavira. I'm 21 years old, I'm a mama. I was born and raised in Denver. My parents are from I came into like the advocacy work, like I wouldn't even consider myself a climate activist until like they were like, you know, this is like climate advocacy. But I started doing education policy, and that transitioned into me wanting to do more youth advocacy work in schools and outside of schools. And I began getting like impacted a lot by the like youth violence going on in the neighborhoods. And you know, that's when I got connected with the Brown Berets. And so I grew up in Commerce City with my grandma, my cousins, and my brothers. And I just grew up knowing like we couldn't drink the water. You know, we could play in the water, we could like wash our hands with the water, but don't drink it. And it wasn't until I got into a college class, my first college class taught me that we're actually like inhaling toxic air pollutants. And I began like doing more research on it because my professor didn't know that I grew up in that neighborhood, you know, so that's when it touched me at first. And I began like telling everyone I knew, did you know like we're inhaling some toxic air. As I started doing the research, I started learning that there's actually birth defects, there's higher asthma rates, there's higher risks of getting cancer. And it just broke my heart because through the lens that I was doing advocacy, I just saw the way that our youth were impacted firsthand. Like schools were were closing early, like if there was too much of like toxic air that was getting emitted. And I saw the connection as like, one, this is happening in our neighborhoods because it's a Black and brown community. Two, no one's cleaning it because it's a Black and brown community, and they clean it by digging up 3 feet of the soil. You know, 6 feet if you plan on growing any plants. So for me, a lot of this advocacy began through just talking with the neighbors, talking with my relatives, talking with community members about their stories, you know, and just connecting that with money and finding people like the last who really gave me like vocabulary and like just connected me to like what this means and what we can do about it.
Yeah, I feel like, doing this project, it was probably the biggest eye opener doing it at home, because I was just like, damn, it's like fucked up here. Like, I didn't even realize that, like, growing up all this time. But again, I think another place that really, really exemplifies like this idea of like not really having control of like your area where you grew up and what's happening in Puerto Rico. We were there an extra day because of the travel for the shoot. And on top of like me really stressing about getting that yellow dress to an at that time, it was a lot of discussion with me, Thomas, and Carlos of like, well, how are we gonna nail this story? Because the more we talk to Isabel, it's like, oh, and then this is why, and then this is why, and then this is what happened here, and in 1800s, this is what happened with, you know, the Industrial Revolution in Puerto Rico. And it got just kind of very overwhelming, and it just got to a point where it's like, it's very difficult to pinpoint one thing, like one issue in Puerto Rico, and it kind of goes back to this idea of colonialism. Like, that's like kind of like the start, and it kind of just all goes down from there. And so I think it was, a spotlight really gets put on that when something like Hurricane Maria does happen, because then you see, right? And I think with like all of these like climate hurricanes, you really only see things when something really bad happens. And being there in 2022 when we were there, we're still seeing it. And it's not covered because time has passed, but if you are living there, after a certain amount of time, it just becomes that's your reality. And so I think like going there and, you know, coming from the outside and being like, okay, well, why is this like this? And and then Isabel kind of, very much walking us through that in a very short amount of time. I think it really was very eye-opening, and I'd love to introduce yourself and speak a little bit to the work that you do and where you're from.
Thank you. My name is Isabel Valentin. Hi, everyone. I am Puerto Rican. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. I'm currently 20 years old, and I've been in the U.S. for a very long time. So I think that intersectionality, to me, just means being Puerto Rican. Because when you're Puerto Rican, the struggles that you experience are, like you said, overwhelming. There's an overwhelming amount of issues, struggles, dilemmas that are really overwhelming your view. And that is just your reality. Intersectionality is my reality. The reality of the matter is that even though I am a woman, or a racialized woman, or a queer woman, or a disabled woman, I get treated differently in different spaces because of all these things separately, and because of all of them at the same time. Every other identity, every other racialized, ethnic, every other identity gets treated differently in every different space because of how they are perceived. So intersectionality means that all these ways that you're being perceived, all these ways that you're being treated, they come together so that everything is being acknowledged. You have everything on the plate. And that's how I've always seen things. It's really interesting to me when people say that intersectionality isn't necessarily a worldview or that doesn't apply everywhere. Because the way I see it, intersectionality is everywhere. Because we are all intersecting identities that come together to make us us. So when we're discriminating when people discriminate against us because of our identities, and they don't consider the other identities that would have gotten us discriminated against in different circles, and you don't include everyone's boldness into an argument, then you're not actually trying to break it down. You're not actually changing anything. Intersectionality means acknowledging everything so that everything can be changed.
The last person on our panel who has not spoke is Rodney Evans. And Rodney is from Alaska, and I think when we started talking to Rodney, we had a pretty good, it was the last shoot that we did, and we had a pretty good idea of like how we approach this, this whole project at this point. But for me, the issues in Alaska were a lot different. And when you think about intersectionality, I think the platform, which is like a big part of this project, is like just giving the space for people to just like know what's going on. Felt like the biggest issue in Alaska, where Rodney, and I'll let you speak to it obviously more, but it's from Rampart, and it's a very small place with a very long history, as so many places in Alaska have. But a lot of the work that's being done there is just like, just trying to like let people know what's going on there while surviving. And I think for me, like I just had no clue. Like I had no idea like what the work was being done there. And I think because of things like a lack of access to Wi-Fi, a lack of access to just resource, because of the actual terrain, the daylight, how that affects, the work that's being done there. I felt like it was just it was the most eye-opening to me in terms of like, oh, this is why this is like this, because it's very different from everywhere else we've been. But obviously also the same in terms of like, there's a lot of different reasons why. And I'd let you introduce yourself and kind of speak a little bit to like that why.
Alright, hey everyone, my name is Rodney Evans. Like Marcus said, I'm one of 2 Alaskans featured in the shoot. I was featured alongside my cousin Brittany, who I'll give a big shout out to. And I am Koyukon Dene, Upiak, and Wichin, which are all Alaskan native groups. And I'm from the village of Rampart, Alaska, also known in our original language as Lafkambi. And growing up, intersectionality has always been something so heavy on us because Rampart kind of has a unique case, and a lot of Alaskan native villages have a unique case where we dealt with things like the gold rush in the late 1800s, where we had an influx of people coming in, outsiders coming in, taking over our communities. And Rampart was one of those that was affected by that, so we have this unique history of going from a native village originally to a huge city full of outsiders looking for gold, looking to extract from the land, and then going back to a native village again. So we really do feel all of the effects, and it's something I've noticed growing up, like since the day I was born, notice all the effects of colonialism, of extraction and everything, like seeing all of the mental health issues and drug and alcohol abuse issues in the villages. These are all the effects of extractive industries, colonialism. So intersectionality to me has always been a part of my climate work because it's something we grew up having to face just without even realizing it. And like Marcus said, one of the biggest things in Alaska is kind of letting the rest of the world know we're so isolated, what the issues are like there. So a lot of the work that I do revolves around that. I'm a filmmaker and photographer based in Alaska. And then I'm also, like Thomas was saying yesterday, I'm also a climate warrior, a land protector, a water protector, which are all kind of terms that were made to describe what our people have been doing for generations. And these are just titles forced on us, even though this is the way we do things. It's time to go.
And now we've got everybody introduced, I kind of wanted to just shift the conversation a little bit into, I think a big thing when it comes to climate, and everybody in the room, I think pretty much everybody in the world at this point understands like this is an issue. You know, when I was growing up, it was kind of like this idea of like, well, is global warming a thing? Is like that just something that somebody's making up? But at this point, it's very much like, everybody kind of knows, right? But I think one of the difficult things is people don't really know what to do about it. And I think why intersectionality matters so much is because a lot of the work that's being done here is against climate, but the wins don't necessarily feel climate-based, if that makes sense. And I would love to just get an idea in terms of like, what does a climate victory look like? Because they do happen. They're very, very difficult, and there's a lot of like hurdles to that. But I did want to ask Jace, I know, you know, with KXL, with things happening in the Black Hills, wanting to know, what does a climate win look like for you, and what is actively hitting you, putting that win between you and it, like wanting to know, yeah, like why isn't it more accessible to have these like easier climate victories if we know we all need them?
The climate victories are my favorite part of being on the front lines. It makes it all worthwhile. With the KXL pipeline, I'm just the third generation fighting this pipeline. So there are many more people who fought against this pipeline generations before me. You know, since the early 2000s, before, you know, when the Keystone pipeline got put in. My aunties and grandmas were on the front line fighting this when they were younger, and the torch got passed down to me. Standing in their footsteps and taking the roles and taking up the torches that they left behind. Like Deborah White, Joy Brown, a lot of people who aren't here today to see that win happen again. Makes it all worthwhile, makes you understand that we all have a certain part to play on the front lines and in our own communities. Each person has a role to play, and a lot of that is motivation. That is realizing what you're fighting for, and realizing that means more to you than all the hurt and pain in the world. Police brutality, encroachment of your land, destruction of your land, going through all those scars and being able to say who you did it, and being able to have that win under your belt. And also on the way out here, we did stop the Summit CO2 pipeline. The PUC just denied their permits. So that's another win for our belt that was going to be going across. So having these makes it easier. It makes you understand that there is an end. It makes you imagine and visualize a future of clean water and clean air for not only us, but our future generations. And how my older generations fought so hard for me. And I continue to fight for those who are no longer here, or yet to be born. Just having that feeling, that victory.
That's all that you can think about sometimes. And I feel like love to hear you speak a little bit in terms of like how that policing issue kind of like goes into everybody from the Atlanta community, because I know that's something you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not sure how many people are aware of what's going on in Atlanta with the development of a cop city, but basically the city has decided to establish a cop training facility where they will practice civilian warfare, and they are currently bringing in lots of cops that aren't even Georgia-based, Atlanta natives, and will not stay in the city. And I think the scariest thing about Cop City is that right now a lot of the focus is on the immediate land that has been cleared down. I want to say it is like 80 acres. It is located in a Black and brown community. It is in the back of one of my closest friends' backyards. She can literally hear the practice shots during the day. I think about the high school students that are around the corner. I'm sorry. And it's really hard to like fight against something like that when it is much bigger than the immediate piece of land that they are developing. Because the Cop City won't just be a training facility. It'll be something that's like integrated into our everyday lives. I attended a neighborhood meeting like 2 weeks ago with Victor Allen around the reopening of a Walmart in our childhood neighborhood. And they're planning on reopening this Walmart in collaboration with the Atlanta Police Department to have a holding cell at the front of the store. And the pandemic has changed a lot for me personally in terms of how I wish to interact with the outside. I've gotten just really fearful. Being a Black person in Atlanta, like you interact with the cops unwillingly. I interact with the cops unwillingly, often. I am stereotyped, I am stopped, I'm questioned. And like, I don't think people recognize that like this is what's gonna happen for all of us in all of our cities if it continues forward. And so like when we think about like intersectionality and the ways in which we really all have to be working together towards all of these problems, right? Because if this Cop City does come to fruition, right? They literally just charged 60 protesters with a RICO case in Atlanta. Things like that are obvious messages to people that are fighting against these things. It makes it hard for us as youth to want to show up and show out, knowing that you could possibly end up in jail and end up in a place that isn't safe at all. Rice Street in Atlanta is a notorious space, and there are deaths in that jail almost weekly. They don't treat people humanely. It is mainly filled with youth. It's really easy to get lost in that system once you're in the system. And it's so easy for people to not care. And I think like the greatest disconnect that our entire society has with policing as an institute is what's really holding us back right now. And like Cop City it's a terrifying project. And it's even more terrifying to have to like live it every day because it's not just this 80 acres that they cleared. For me, it is going into a Walmart. It is turning out of my driveway and being stopped and not being told why I'm being stopped. It is having to pick up a sibling from jail at 2 a.m., right? Having to raise bail funds for friends. Like that is what Cop City is for me currently. And I don't want that to extend beyond Atlanta. And I think it also sends a very clear message that they are doing this in the South, right? A lot of things happen in the South first before they go elsewhere. A lot of atrocities, a lot of trauma. When we think about the mass population of Black and brown bodies that are in the South, and we think about the system that is policing, it's just terrifying. I hope I answered that question. Sorry, I got emotional.
perfect response to why what intersectionality is and what it looks like. It touches you in every form of your life, even if you are not even thinking about it. And I think in a place like Atlanta, where there's something so charged happening right now, and in a place like Atlanta that there always is, I don't want to even downplay it as if like there's not, like this is something new. Like Atlanta is definitely always at the forefront of so many things. Being in the heart of the South and really always having a very active voice within these spaces. I think to kind of bring it back from like where I'm from, this idea of climate justice, right? When I think about some of the issues that I had growing up where I'm from, it was a lot of like drug abuse, alcohol, you have like gang violence, and it's like, okay, well, how does gang violence tie into climate activism? And for me, it's like, well, understanding, and I think Danielle spoke to this so much when we were together, this idea of, well, if I can't have like water that is like, to be healthy, if I can't have access to food to be healthy, then that's gonna put me in a certain situation where unknowingly I'm gonna do what I have to do, right? And that's a climate issue at the end of the day. And so I would really love for you, Alessandra, to kind of give a little bit of light into like what that looks like in Commerce City, in Northeast Denver.
Can y'all hear me? Hello? Okay. I think about this a lot. I think about the impacts of the lack of resources that Commerce City has gotten historically, and now I think about the ways that our communities are being gentrified, and the theatrics of cleaning these neighborhoods, cleaning the soil in order to continue gentrifying and continue pushing us out of our own communities. And I've seen the impacts of that through the increase of gang violence. You know, when we're pushed out of our neighborhoods, we're forced into others, and you know, you see the clash in gangs, the clash in territories, you know? So, my homeboy, for example, he's from Montbello, and he was pushed into the Commerce City area, and he was murdered there. And that was during a time when I was working very hard on getting support for our young men in our communities, and that hit us really hard. When we see these deaths, it's not just because everybody's angry and everybody has a gun and they want to shoot. These issues start because we're losing our homes, we're losing our stability. We don't have fresh air, we don't have enough grocery stores, and that homeboy specifically was pushed out of school. You know, that's why I fight so hard for our youth who are criminalized since the moment they step into a school, the moment they step outside of the school, and there's police in our neighborhoods, over-policing in our neighborhoods. And yeah, I think that I don't want to rant too much, but yeah, I see it happen a lot with the gentrification in our neighborhoods, and the theatrics of cleaning our neighborhoods, you know, and it's not for us. The theatrics of making these murals in our neighborhoods and making it pretty, but it's not for us, you know?
Thank you. I think kind of in a direct response to that, in terms of like a place like Hoopa, when we were there, Danielle, I think it became really clear for us being there
like what the issue was, right? And I think for me, I feel like you have such a great way of breaking this down in terms of like, okay, how does the river that runs through your community, how does that feed your community in every single way? And I would love for you to just speak a little bit in terms of like what that connection actually looks like, because I think it's apparent, but like there's so many different parts of that.
Yeah, definitely. This might go in and out, but I can talk kind of loud, so I think we're good. Like I said, I grew up on the river. I grew up like a 2-minute walk from my favorite swimming pool, a 10-minute walk from the village that my people originated from. I grew up not feeling, I had this place, this river that always felt safe. It always felt like home. I never quite understood why, but I always knew that I could go there and feel that. And when you grow up on a reservation, life is not easy. We've done things, we were talking in high school one time, count on your fingers how many people in this town have 2 healthy parents. And we couldn't count at 5, we couldn't fill a hand. And so, we experienced a lot of hardship growing up, but we experienced a lot of beauty also. We experienced a place that most people don't get to see in their entire life. We experienced a place that meant everything to our people since the day that we originated there. We are thankfully one of the tribes that did not get removed from our homelands during colonization. So we are still in the place where our ceremony started. We're still in the place where the first group of women and man, came to be. We're still in the place where our creation story, is right where we still grow up. And so, like I said, growing up, that was my whole life. My nickname back home is Ducky. You won't hear anybody call me anything else, because I was always there. I was always in the water. It was somewhere that I always felt safe. And then I started growing up, and I come from a ceremony family, and I started recognizing that everything in our ceremonies comes from this river. If you look at the photos over there, that cap I have on my hat, everything in that cap comes from the river. The roots, the sticks, the woodpeckers on top come from right along the sides of the river. Everything about who we are comes from these places, for our ceremonies, for our prayers. And then I got a little bit older and I started realizing it's much more than just what it provides for ceremony. It's more than what it makes you feel like. This river is everything to us. And I started talking to my grandma about that one day, and she told me a story of, how her grandma told her that when you look upriver, you're looking at the past, you're looking at the people who, came before. When you look upriver, you're looking at the future, the ones who are still to come, everything that is still to come. And as long as it's still coming, that river's still flowing, there's still things to come. And you look downriver and you get to see everything that came before you, all your ancestors, all the people, all the places that would no longer exist. And so, I started realizing that it was everything to our people. It wasn't just this place of recreation or this place of ceremony. It was literally our lifeline. And then, growing up, like I said, we experienced hardship, and you become a teenager and you start recognizing that trauma and hardship and not enough parental supervision leads your friends to, and yourself to bad decisions, to these things like drugs and alcohol and mental health issues and, things that are just inevitably bad. And so, and we, for us, where I come from, we fought for, many, many years for Cabot Dam removal. And then the Trinity River also, there's huge diversions from this river that we still have not won, that we're still fighting for to get that water back. And it, some of my friends, when I got more heavily involved in this work, they asked me, why? Because it's kind of impossible, right? Indians don't win. We don't get our water back. They take everything from us. Like what's left? And a lot of my friends kind of had that same mindset, and it was really, really sad, And I started like just talking with them, and everybody at home recognizes like how important these waterways are to us, how important these sacred spaces are to us. But there's not a lot of hope for some people left. It doesn't always make sense to fight for something that you don't think you're ever gonna win. And so it was, like speaking to what Marcus really said. the way that the river is in us, you know, this river runs through our veins as much as blood does. You know, everything about who we are comes from that river. And it's been said many times in my community that when that river no longer runs, our people no longer have, we no longer exist. We no longer have a purpose. We no longer have a lifeline. We no longer have anything that speaks to who we are and where we come from. And I've seen many people over the years, you know, get lost in this hopelessness. But I've seen many people come out of that space also, and what helps them come out of that is that river, is the place that we come from. It comes from the strength of everything around us, from the river and the mountains to the people, the elders. And you know, back home, everybody recognizes that that's a place that we're safe. Because out here in the rest of the world, that's not the case. That's hardly ever the case. But when we're home and we're having boat dance on the river, or we're right next to the river, you know, for ceremony, we're swimming, we're rafting, or whatever we're doing, we're safe there. Nothing can hurt us, nothing can touch us, because all of the people who have ever existed, the Arupa, Yura, Karu, Klamath, everybody who comes from that river basin, they're still there. You know, they're still there with us, and everybody who is yet to come is still there behind us. And so I think it just really speaks to, you know, this is everything. It's not something. It's literally everything to the people of the Klamath River Basin. Rivers, water is truly life. And so I appreciate being able to bring that up.
Yeah, and I think a big theme throughout everybody is like, what does a climate win look like? And it just means existing. Right? Like, it just means being able to wake up and not having to worry. And I think this idea of gentrification is something that we see in big cities. We obviously very much see it in New York, see it in Brooklyn, we see it in Harlem, just every part of this city. But when we were interviewing Rodney and Brittany before going and shooting in Rampart, we interviewed them separately before we knew that they were cousins. And when we talked about where they wanted to be, where their story was, where they wanted to be shot, they both live in Fairbanks, but there's this idea of, like, we want to be shot in Rampart. And Rampart's not this place that I knew of. I knew about Fairbanks. But when we asked them about it, they both had the pretty much same exact answer in terms of, like, what is the history of Rampart? What is the history of that land? And why that's so important. And I was just wondering if you could speak to a little bit in terms of, like, why people did, like, why so many people have moved to Fairbanks, and what does that push-pull look like, right? Because I think there's this, like, this want to be in this space, but kind of what happened to, like, lead people to these larger cities and leave a place like Rampart?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And there's this idea that as Indigenous people all over the world, like, we're forced to live in two worlds. We're forced to live in the world of our traditional ways, our villages, our communities, but we're also forced to adapt to the bigger cities and capitalism, everything moving forward in the big city life. In Rampart, we have a case like that, where it's so distinct, and part of that is because of schooling. And back in, I think it was 1998, 96, sometime in that time frame, the Rampart School actually shut down because there weren't enough students, weren't enough kids in the village. And that was detrimental to so many of the kids in the village, and that forced so many people, including me, including Brittany, to move out of Rampart and be forced into the big city like Fairbanks, just so we could get proper education and learn, like, the westernized education system and everything. And that was so detrimental to the population of the village, to learning our traditional ways, practicing our traditional ways. And so much of my work growing up has been getting back to Rampart. Outside of climate and everything, it's also been getting back to Rampart, learning my traditional ways again. Once I graduated, I made, like, a vow. I was like, I want to be able to learn my traditional language before I learn anything else, before I continue with, like, college or anything like that. I want to learn first my traditional ways again, because our students, our people, all of our kids in our village have been forced to move out. And when I think of climate victories too, I also think about community victories, because our community victories are our climate victories. And one of the most recent ones, or one of the more recent ones, is back in 2015, the Rampart School was able to reopen finally after so many years of being shut down, and that was huge for us. And now the school is still open. All of the kids in this photo are able to learn new language as a part of their school system. And then another victory even this year, more recently, is that Rampart used to have this dance group. That's why all of these kids have their traditional regalia. But as people moved away, as like the spearheaders of the dance group moved away, and they went into dancing more for the past few years, we haven't had a dance group in Rampart. We haven't been able to bring our stories and our songs to different conferences just because we didn't have anybody spearheading that dance group. But recently, just in the last couple months, the person moved back that was really the head of the dance group, and so all of the kids in this photo are once again able to learn their language and learn and sing all their traditional songs and do their traditional dances. So that's one of the biggest community victories and furthermore climate victories we've had.
Yeah, and I think that the idea of land and it really is what connects every single story is like this real pride of like where you're from and wanting to be able to exist where you're from and be able to sustain yourself where you're from. And in a very similar way, but in a very different place in Puerto Rico, and the work that Isabel is doing is it's very interesting to see the like polarity in terms of like the gentrification of what it looks like there on that island. That photo in the back is it's in La Perla on the coast, and down there it's still very much very ravaged by the hurricane. But if you can literally walk, I feel like 500 feet, and you are in this totally different place. You are in this tourist area, and it's there's drinks, there's nightlife, and there's not a lot of thought in terms of like what's going on. And so I feel like kind of similar to Fairbanks where like folks have to leave. I'd love for you to speak a little bit in terms of like, you now are here, you now are in New York, upstate, I believe, but doing work. But I know it's all for Puerto Rico, but why did you decide to come here to do that work, for back home?
I was prepared to answer what victory looks like, but I will answer that question. I moved to New York for a lot of reasons. None of them were because I really wanted to or was passionate about New York. I know there's a lot of romanticization about the city. I never really was that person. But I moved to New York because I knew that no matter what I did, if it didn't get heard, it wouldn't matter. And Puerto Rico, actually I'm going to blend both answers. I don't know what a victory looks like in Puerto Rico. I don't. I'm the last person to speak. I've been waiting 6 turns to speak and I couldn't think of an answer. And I think that's because the issues in Puerto Rico, they kind of stay there and it bounces around in a consistent echo chamber. And sometimes we joke about it back home that it's because nothing can like leave Puerto Rico. Like they have to get on a ship, you can't like drive out, it has to be like on a boat or an airplane. But I really think it's because of lack of wanting, and it's not our want, but lack of like a systematic want for Puerto Rico to lose. It sounds a little ridiculous when you say it, but it's like every system that functions, that runs the world, they're all against Puerto Rican interests. So when you are living with that reality, you can't really know what a victory looks like until you've seen other victories. So moving to New York, I was like, this is a place where I can get the attention from the outside that we need to make these victories happen. And I really hope that we can get a really big victory in Puerto Rico. I know there's been so many tiny ones, and I'm still grateful for all of them. But I came to New York to help Puerto Rico. I will go back to Puerto Rico the second I can. And I hope that Puerto Rico gets a win because, damn, we deserve it. We deserve it.
Yeah, and I feel like, I feel like everybody kind of painted a picture of what intersectionality looks like, and I hope that everybody here can go away understanding what that looks like in different places, as well as what that looks like in this country in general. Another big part of why we did this is this country is very large. The idea of it being a country is kind of sort of interesting ownership that doesn't really make sense. The through lines of Puerto Rico, which is technically the U.S. and territory, and Alaska, like these are two very different places. Like they don't look like the same. The people don't interact with the environment in the same way. But yet the problems there are because of the same things, because of the government here. And so I did just find that to be like a very interesting thing of like, okay, well, everything in this project was about climate, but everything about climate looks very different. And, you know, I'm glad everybody got to speak 2 times. I didn't plan it like that, but it like worked out. I tried to be fair. So, we have about 5 to 10 minutes left, and I just wanted to open the floor to everybody in attendance who might have any questions for anybody or for just the panel in general. So if anybody wants to raise their hand and has a question, we'd love to take some responses.
Actually, for you, Alessandra, I think sometimes when people think of sunboard, they think, okay, it's like just the air, which is like a given because you see the smoke plumes coming out of it. You know, you see, like they tell us all the time that in any given day in Denver, Colorado, there are high levels of hydrogen cyanide, which basically causes like complete neurological breakdown. So move to Denver. But what are the other ways that something like that is affecting like what are the other elements or the other ways that it's affecting it besides just the air?
Well, our soil is contaminated. We're not able to use our soil. The first thing that came to mind is just, I mean, in my photo, I was pregnant, you know, and in that time, and even now, like, I still think about the birth defects that come from just growing up in Commerce City and inhaling that my whole life. And I think about my baby who, like, when he was born, he had medical issues, you know? And there's really no explanation for my baby's medical issues, but I can't help but wonder, like, is it because I grew up in Commerce City, you know? The doctors did tell me he's at higher risk of having asthma. Is that because, like, we live right by someone? So for me, like, something that I'm always going to carry is that those toxins that we're inhaling are not only in the air, but in my DNA and in my baby's DNA. And I don't know how much longer it's going to continue in the future generations in their bloodline, you know?
My question is for Jennifer. You're Jennifer. Okay, I just want to make sure.
How long ago did this start where you were able to see the pattern of what was going to happen? When did it become concerning to the community? This Cop City, how long ago did it start, and when did the community recognize the seriousness of it?
So like a lot of things that happen politically in Georgia or in the US, it's something that's been under works for a really long time with like politicians and funders, private investors, but it's not anything that was brought to the community's attention, or the community wasn't able to take it as seriously until like recently. I would say within the past 3 years. So COVID really allowed for like the amplification of a lot of our problems to be seen, like finally. And so it's like similar things with Sapelo and land issues on Sapelo and rezoning. They happen last minute, and that's on purpose so that the people can't react. And so even down to like the petition, we had to, the citizens had to collect signatures to petition for putting Cop City on the ballot so that people can vote for it. And at first they required, I want to say 70,000. No, it was something ridiculous, a ridiculous amount of signatures within like 2 weeks or 2 months, and they had to be City of Atlanta residents. And so another tactic used to disenfranchise people working towards getting rid of a problem. And so the community wasn't given a lot of time to like react and organize in a way that would be meaningful for all of us. I think it's still very discombobulated. And there's different sides of the movement. So there's like the white side of Cop City, and then there's the black side of Cop City. And then those sort of clash. And so it's still not something that is like the succinct effort, I think, on the community's part, but we are trying. But it's really difficult. And I mean, you just notice it just happens literally overnight. It's really hard to like put a timeline to it because you could literally wake up the next day and the forest is gone, like 80,000 acres worth of trees are gone. And it looks different, like that looks different. And yeah, it's too late sometimes. By the time you notice it, too late, not too late. But yeah, so I would say like fairly recently, within the past 3 years.
So it sounds to me like they were creating fear as far as crime, so that these people would sign this petition to have this Cop City. Is that kind of how it?
So the petition was against the Cop City. So the petition was something that the community came together to advocate for, so that we could have the opportunity to vote, to actually vote on the development of it. And so the city came back and required that we had a certain amount of signatures, and then there were also regulations around that. So they had to be City of Atlanta signatures, you had to have a City of Atlanta address, and yada, yada, yada. So eventually they did get rid of that requirement. And I actually am currently managing a farmer's market in Atlanta that runs every Sunday, and about 2,500 customers will flow through the market every Sunday. And we were able to use that space as a really like important space to collect signatures, especially once they got rid of those regulations that people had to be City of Atlanta residents. But we ended up, as a city, collecting 116,000 signatures. Well over what was required. And I would say like it's really hard. Just once you interact with the police once, it's really just like, I don't want to do that again. And so like it's really hard to want to get back in the fight, but I felt like even though I wasn't comfortable being on the front lines, because being on the front lines could literally have resulted in me having a RICO, right? That's the reality for some of my community members at the moment. I was able to utilize my space as the manager of a market to still help towards this fight. And bring awareness to it, because a lot of people in the city didn't know. So not only were people collecting signatures, they were also immediately informing people on what was happening in their own backyards. And so it was a huge mass education event that had to occur literally within the past 6 months. I would definitely mark that. But it's just so, everything has been so last minute, and that's on purpose.
Thank you.
I think we have time for just one more question. And I think let's have, right here. We have about 5 more minutes before they're just gonna cut me off.
My question is for Jacelyn. What can people do to support the fight against the Dakota Access Pipeline right now? Because even though a lot of this work, people think about the protests and the movement that we started in the past, but the truth is the pipeline is still there right now. So how can people help? How can people help support your community in the continual fight right now against those industries?
That is a really awesome question. I actually just rolled in with a crew called the Standing Rock Collective. They are community-based community organizers who live in Wapwa, Standing Rock, Kennel,
and Porcupine communities, and they go to every district meeting. They lobby their own tribal members, because like corruption can even be in tribal government sometimes. It's just the way the governments go. They actually came here with me. I just rolled up with them today. When this is done, I can give you their Facebook page. These are rural grassroots organizers who work on the front line in the light of Donna Brayville hours passing. We're trying to keep her legacy alive, trying to support our relatives who are tribal members. I'm not a standard tribal member, but I do roll with people who are tribal members, and we support our sister tribe as much as they support us on the front lines of KXL, so it goes hand in hand. Throughout those fights, there are people who are still community organizing and still go to like every tribal meeting, every district meeting. It really starts in the footwork in the communities, in the trenches with the people, and the people it directly affects. Because fear tactics that community or that revolves around the community, like the community of Bismarck, Martin County, the governor of North Dakota, the police brutality was really after everybody left. Cannibal and the stand-up community were detrimentally affected by that. Some people lived in fear a lot of the days. Some people, it took a lot of them to even go to Bismarck. So it's been a struggle to, reignite that fire, but it's not been totally dimmed out. There are people who still, till this day, have been fighting in our community to make that change, to make sure the regulations are up to code, and to make sure we hold these corporations accountable. We recently protested in Lincoln, Nebraska. They're trying to put a water pump station to increase the amount of flow going through this pipeline. The percentage just goes up for breaking. So we support them, because whatever happens upstream happens to us all downstream as water flows. But yeah, if anybody else wants to link up with people who are fighting Dakota Access, or just let me know. I'll be over here a little bit, and the people who are actually here today, I can link them up with you. Thank you for so much for. A lot of people don't ask that question, because just because no DAP will disperse doesn't mean the fight isn't still going on in the communities. So I really thank you for remembering us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you everybody for coming out. I think on that note, we're done today. They're gonna cut me off probably while we're still talking. But tomorrow we're gonna have another panel, and that's gonna be about what climate work looks like. I think this really set the tee in terms of what are the many ways that what does the climate fight entail. Tomorrow's gonna be about how the other 6 members really are doing that. I think Jennifer kind of leads us into it really perfectly with the farmers market and what she's doing there. A lot of people look at climate work and they are just activism in general, and they see protests, they see fights in the street, they see people going to jail, and there's a lot more behind that. There's a lot more things that people are doing in communities that are sustainable, that are a long haul type fight, because I've learned from so many that you can't always be in that active fight. There's a lot of other things that you can do. So thank you everybody for coming out. Please give everybody a round of applause.